Welcome to Roadie Wellness, where we explore all things health and self-care. Whether you're seeking mental clarity, physical fitness, or insight from students like you, we've got you covered. Hello, I'm your host, Olivia Rathbun. I'm here today with Dr. Warren Schwartz. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Olivia.
Hi.
Glad to be here.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do there and some of the work that you participate in?
Sure. I'm a psychologist at the Counseling Center. I've been here for, I think, 7 years. I lose count. And mostly clinical work. So I see students in shorter-term individual therapy, which is the modality that we practice in, and do some group work and some outreach and social justice work. A lot more than just counseling. We've really focused over the last years in integrating ourselves with the community rather than being a standalone office where we're just doing clinical work and seeing one student after another. It's really important for us to be engaged with our community and to, in collaboration with everybody else, foster a climate of well-being for our students.
Mm-hmm. And advocate for mental health as well.
It is.
So today we're going to be talking about anxiety. I know a lot of students, young people, college students have experienced anxiety or will experience anxiety in college. I was hoping you could do a quick overview, just what anxiety is and how this might differ from just emotions like worrying and fear.
So yes, we are living in anxious times, especially for young people. So to define anxiety, we usually think about it as a mental and or physical state of negative arousal that happens when a threat is perceived, and perceived being an operative word, and we'll get to that in a minute. But we think of anxiety as a manifestation of a natural organismic response to threat. Some people refer to fight or flight as a response to threat. So when we're faced with a perceived threat, all animals, including humans, become activated. Heart rate increases, respiratory rate increases. The other physiological processes kind of kick into gear to ready us to respond to that threat. The problems that humans face is that we often see threat when it's not there. We're conscious creatures, meaning-making creatures, and that sets us apart from the other animals. So we tend to think a lot, and we tend to read into stimuli in our environment and project all sorts of fear and dread into things that really are not threatening at all. And that's problematic, and that's part of anxiety, is being afraid of something that's not really threatening. There's an overestimation of threat. So, for example, a student who is facing an upcoming exam, they may believe with 100% certainty or 90% certainty that they're going to fail that exam. And this despite the fact that they've taken other exams in this class and they've done amazingly well. They've never failed an exam in their whole life. They know the material, but despite all of this evidence, they're fairly certain that they're going to fail. And they lock up in the exam, and then maybe they do fail. So there's an overestimate of the threat. Another example is a person who walks around all the time believing that other people are having all sorts of nasty thoughts about them when there's no evidence of that. So to sum it up, anxiety is when we overestimate the likelihood of negative circumstances, and usually that's accompanied by this physiological and psychological arousal that happens.
Those examples that you used, I think a lot of people can relate to as well.
Those are very common.
Yes, definitely. How common would you say anxiety is in college students?
So it's very common. There was a study in 2022 that was done by the American College Health Association, and it was a survey of 54,000 undergrads across the United States. And 35% of the students who responded to the survey give it that this is a biased sample because the people who are responding are more interested in the study. But still, 35% said they had been diagnosed with anxiety. That is high. That's more than 1 in 3. And diagnosed, not just experienced anxiety, but actually diagnosed. About 77% of those students who were diagnosed reported discussing their anxiety with a healthcare professional in the previous year. So it's very common. Not only is it common, but it's the number one presenting problem for college students who engage in counseling center services. When we see them at their first visit, they fill out what's called the CCAPS. It's the Counseling Center Assessment of Psychological Symptoms, an inventory rating scale for a variety of problems. The CCAP scores are collated nationally, confidentially, anonymously, and we consistently find that anxiety complaints rise to the top, always.
So that evaluation, is that done just at URI, or is that done on a national level?
Nationally.
Okay,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yep.
What are some signs and symptoms that someone with anxiety, or who may not be diagnosed but may think they have anxiety, what are those symptoms that they may have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one is something that we referred to before, which is worry. These individuals tend to worry a lot. Sometimes the worries are more specific, as we see in the case of phobias. So someone might have a fear of social interactions, or they might have a fear of spiders or lightning. But usually the worries are more generalized. It's pretty rare that we just see a very specific phobia like that. So worry is a common symptom. Other symptoms are more physical, shortness of breath, elevated heart and respiratory rate, excessive perspiration, muscle tension, nausea, other GI issues. And some of these physical symptoms, especially the elevated heart and respiratory rate, typify panic disorder. And panic disorder is a recurring experience of discrete periods of negative arousal, usually physical, but it's accompanied by mental arousal too, that is a very worrisome, negative experience that can be hard to come out of. We can talk a little more about anxiety management going forward. But one thing that can break through or cause a breakthrough in these symptoms, or a first experience of these symptoms, is being new to college. That is the case, and you had said before that you've heard people say that, and I have too.
Yes, yeah, I've had many friends who maybe had a little bit of symptoms of anxiety, but once they came to college, it's been a big change for them, and that's when they had their first panic attack, or that's when a lot of these symptoms became more consistent over time. So that's why I think it's important that people learn more about anxiety and those symptoms to recognize it and get the help they need or figure out some coping skills for themselves.
I agree. And early intervention is always best when it comes to really anything. So if something comes up, try to engage with it, get some help, and manage it before it takes on a life of its own.
Yeah. And going off of that, what are some ways that a student can either manage their own anxiety or seek help that can help them manage that anxiety?
So some basic things like adequate sleep, ample exercise, proper nutrition, these basic lifestyle behavioral sets that really help with everything. And when we're treating our bodies well, we're more likely to buffer, prevent anxiety, and regulate mood. Some specific techniques that are tried and true are deep breathing, or what we call abdominal breathing, and muscle relaxation. These all work very well in helping people soothe themselves when they're anxious. Meditation, present-focused grounding techniques can also help, and we can show you all of these at the counseling center. But in addition to the preventative and the management strategies, there are some longer term and growth oriented measures that really can help people get underneath the anxiety and kind of root it out. It is important to understand the source of anxiety. What is the person's history? Do they have a history of abandonment, loss of love from their parents, insecure attachments, financial insecurity? All of these things that really are important to understand at a deeper level, even beyond a conscious level. We sometimes realize more about ourselves as we talk more about ourselves. One more thing that I want to say about prevention and managing anxiety. We ask what are the relevant identity considerations that a person is presenting with when you grow up in a world as a marginalized person. You face all sorts of real threat, real disadvantage on a regular basis. So sometimes having a conversation about that helps in itself. Also helpful to work on establishing, maintaining, and helping people attach to nurturing and supportive communities on campus.
Yeah, we have a lot on campus, different clubs, different organizations where people can find other people who have shared similar experiences to them and can find that community.
Definitely, including social justice work. We're living in very uncertain and anxious times where a lot of bad things are happening in the world, and to be able to act on that and feel some sense of agency and also social connection in the face of what sometimes feels very helpless can be very helpful.
For therapy, would you recommend that for anyone if you're saying kind of have that be a preventative treatment, or is there certain symptoms that point to someone who may need more help or more outside resources, whether that be medication, therapy, groups, something like that?
Mm-hmm. In terms of anxiety, I would say if a person finds themselves worrying frequently and they're looping and it keeps happening, if they're experiencing medically unexplained physical symptoms like nausea, loss of appetite, other symptoms, if they're having panic symptoms, that racing heart, that shortness of breath, if they feel tense, if they find themselves questioning their value or they're overly preoccupied with others' perceptions of them, these are all potentially anxiety experiences that might lead someone to ask for professional help. Obviously, if someone's having thoughts of suicide or harming other people, that's, of course, something to look into. But I'll say, if there's any question about whether or not you need help, let's have a brief conversation about it. There's no obligation to continue. We can see students on a walk-in basis or a call-in basis, and we have a brief conversation, and we talk about what might be ahead of them.
Mm-hmm. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the counseling services here at URI are free for students, right?
That's correct. Our services are included in the student services fee that students pay. So in that way, it's free. But we do not bill insurance, which helps in terms of privacy because parents get the bill. So it's more private to not have to bill the insurance. And then there's the inclusiveness part of it where some people have insurances with high deductibles and they can't afford to pay it. So, included in the student services fee.
How can a person support a friend with anxiety? Maybe that person doesn't want to go to the counseling center or is a little hesitant, or a friend notices their friend is kind of suffering these symptoms. How can they go about helping their friend?
Mm-hmm. Friends are an incredibly powerful source of support for all ages, but maybe especially for young people. At least they can be. Sometimes they're not. But when they're not, we need to recognize that and move on, screen our people well. Healthy friendships are ones where you feel heard, where the other person doesn't overstep, where they can compassionately confront you about things that might be getting in the way of your well-being. Helpful friends encourage healthy thinking and living. And if a person is hesitant to go to the counseling center, that's fine, and we can respect that. But we can also let them know that we're not a threat, and we're here on your terms. And if you want our help, we're here for you. Maybe that message could be conveyed in an invitation to come with you, to walk them down as a source of support. And sometimes the friend will sit in the waiting room or go and do their thing. But sometimes that can be very soothing and facilitative of getting them through the door.
Yeah, thank you. Can you talk more about what the Counseling Center does for students here at URI? I know you talked a lot about it, but any other information that you want to get out there and really promote?
So we do a lot, and we're very proud of the work that we do. I don't want to repeat too much. I think we covered the short-term individual confidential therapy, helping students grow and move forward. Groups, they're listed on the Counseling Center website. We refresh that list every semester, so you can check in with the Counseling Center website in a couple weeks and you can see what's offered this semester. We're very active in inclusiveness, diversity, social justice efforts. We're very deliberate about diversifying our staff. Our leadership has been very active in that and successful with that. We're reaching out to groups on campus, disenfranchised groups, minoritized groups, addressing racism, bigotry, all of the things that make our community less safe. We want this to be a place where everybody feels safe, included, and celebrated. We do regular outreach work like this. This is outreach. And we link students to resources in the community and resources on campus. We have a very excellent care manager who does that. And if a student doesn't fit our scope of services, or if we don't have the resources within the counseling center, we will help them find those resources if it's possible.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that is very important work that you're talking about, especially with diversifying the counseling center, because I know a lot of people like to talk with therapists that have shared similar experiences or just know their experiences. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad that you brought that up. That was going to be a question that I was going to ask, actually.
Yes.
And lastly, how can students connect with you, with the counseling center, to get that help?
Phone. Just give us a call, 401-874-2288. We do what we call a pre-screen, which is a very brief conversation between a student and one of our clinicians where we suss out some of the challenges that a person is facing, talk with them about what they'd like to overcome or areas that they'd like to grow in, and then have a conversation about how we can be helpful to them.
Before we wrap up, a quick reminder that all information shared in today's podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. Thank you for listening to another episode of Rhody Wellness. If you like what you heard today, tune in every Tuesday on all podcast platforms for more. If you want to stay up to date on events and healthcare tips, please follow us at URI Health Promotions on Instagram. And if you have any ideas for future podcast episodes or more social media content that you'd like to see, please feel free to DM us or email us. Until next time, take care and stay healthy.